Welcome to Shadowed Tales Archive. Tonight, we invite you to descend into darkness with a chilling anthology of horror stories, each one inspired by true events. This is episode 7. Let the nightmare begin. It wears my face. I guess I don't know where to start. The beginning would be the obvious place, but I don't know what the beginning was. The whispers? The shadows? Objects moving by themselves? Electronics going haywire? Or was it the first time I actually saw it? Soulless pits for eyes and a featureless, paper-white face. I'm sure jumping right into "there's a monster in my closet" would be a bit cliche. I always knew it was there before it ever showed itself to me. The first time I really knew, was Christmas Eve of 2010. I was with my ex-boyfriend at the time. His name was Ryan. He had taken me home early from dinner at a friend's house because I was feeling ill. Naturally, I went straight to bed, and he stayed up, deciding to play his video games. I don't remember when I fell asleep, or how long I had been out before I woke up. All I remember was how I woke up. My memory of waking up is crystal clear, even now. While regaining consciousness, I remember an unnatural cold in the room. Yes, I realize it was December, but Arizona never gets that cold. I remember feeling freezing cold hands brush against my bare arms before the duvet on my bed was pulled up over my body. I hadn't opened my eyes until then, and I thought I saw Ryan standing at the edge of my bed. My vision was still blurry, so I called out his name with a yawn, blinking to clear my eyes of sleep. In a fraction of a second, the shadow I thought I saw was gone. I was ready to forget the whole thing and go back to sleep, so I turned over onto my side, now facing the opposite side of my room. If I had already closed my eyes, I wouldn't have noticed the face sharing my pillow. It was so close to me. The pale white and almost glowing face with empty coal-black sockets for eyes, that my nose almost touched it. With an immediate jerk back, I nearly flung myself over the side of my bed. I would have screamed if my dinner hadn't beaten my voice out of my mouth. Regardless, Ryan had burst into my room moments later to witness me vomiting all over myself and my bed. Needless to say, he was pretty mad at me, since he was staying over for the holidays at my mom's house, and he had to sleep in that very same bed with me. I didn't know how to explain what just happened or what I had seen, so I stayed quiet. There was no further trace of the ghastly face in my room that night. I didn't see anything for a while after that either, not even the shadows or subtle movements in the corner of my eyes. It must have been spring the next time it appeared. It was after high school one day, and Ryan and I were arguing about what I can't remember. The only reason I remember the fight was because it was the first time he had ever hit me. It's funny that I don't remember the exact context, but I remember locking myself in my bathroom and crying in the dark. I also remember a sharp, distinct tapping. Thinking it was Ryan trying to apologize, I yelled for him to go away. I didn't get an answer, just more intervaled tapping like a sharp fingernail on the thin wood of my bathroom door. I could see the shadow of someone standing on the other side, breaking the only light that was flowing into the bathroom from under the door. I called his name, no longer angry, no longer crying. Now I felt wrong, sick almost, and very nervous. When the tapping stopped, I stared at the shadow underneath the door, watching it stay still. Feeling anxious now, I slowly laid myself on the floor. I moved to look underneath the door, expecting to see the toes of Ryan's boots. Instead, I was met with a large, impossibly deep eye socket and a smooth, white, and featureless face. The same face from Christmas, just staring at me with phantom eyes. This time, I was able to scream, and I screamed as loud as I could. Ryan's name broke as it flew from my throat with a shrillness that was comparable only to nails on a chalkboard. The bathroom instantly began to shake with loud bangs instead of the quiet tapping. I was afraid that the door would bust off its hinges, so I wedged myself between the bathroom sink and toilet with my hands over my ears and my eyes shut tight. It felt like an eternity before Ryan finally came to get me. This time I couldn't hide what happened. How do you explain screaming at the top of your lungs for no reason? So I told him. I even told him about Christmas, I was surprised when he believed me, no questions asked, and even more shocked when he seemed to recognize my description of that awful face. His younger sister, who was my age, would apparently wake up to a white face floating under her covers, wear her bed sheets like a cloak. He also told me their late mother was gifted, as he called it, and it was passed on to them. He believed it may have followed him to my house. So I had Ryan to thank for that thing. And then he gave me what I thought was some pretty psycho advice at the time. Talk to it. He wanted me to speak to that thing, that horrible face. It was almost a week before I saw it again. It was a school night, and I had gotten home late from my job at a restaurant. All I wanted to do was kick off my shoes and fall asleep. The second I laid down, my eyes were drawn to it like magnets. It was hovering in the top corner of my open closet, the face nearly glowing to distinguish itself from the dark in my room. I was frozen in fear, clutching the covers of my bed tightly to my chest, as my wide eyes stared straight into the cavernous pits of the ghastly face. I didn't know what to do. There was no way I was going to try to talk to this thing. So all I could do was stare back, frightened and half hiding underneath the covers of my bed. After an eternity and a half, the white face faded as it sunk back into my closet, and I no longer had a clear sight of it. The next day at school was one of the worst I ever had. I felt even worse than I looked, and I looked dead. I couldn't focus in my classes. I felt amazed by the time my last class ended that I had made it through the day. I remember that the second I was out of my classroom, my phone was up to my ear calling Ryan. I had wanted him to pick me up so I didn't have to walk home. I never wanted to go back there. However, he was out getting high with his friends, who disliked me for being a prude, and they convinced him not to come and get me. I tried convincing him in my favor, but he still refused, even after I told him about what happened last night. He just told me the same thing he did before and said, "Talk to it. Ask what it wants." He told me to have a damn conversation with the thing in my closet. That was all the advice I had, however. I didn't think to ask or trust telling anybody else. Asking for help was out of the question. That night, when I finally mustered up the courage to go to bed, I was relieved to apparently be alone in the room. I couldn't quite bring myself to close my closet door either. I'm not sure if I actually fell asleep or if I just blinked, but I couldn't take my eyes off my open closet the entire night. With that brief closing of my eyes, it appeared. In an instant, I was wide awake and very frightened. With our staring match, my eyes getting lost in its soulless pits, I did the only thing I knew to do. I was able to squeak, half of my face covered by my blankets. For the next few terrifying moments, I was afraid the face would respond to me. The response, thankfully, never came, and the room stayed silent save for my quickened breath. The question I had for it came out a bit louder. "What do you want?" I never got an answer. The face would never stay long, and it would do nothing but stare at me. I don't want to say that I actually got used to seeing the face, but it stopped startling me. It even got to the point of me telling it goodnight before I turned my back to my closet so I could fall asleep. Back then, it never appeared outside of the closet, and it would only show up at night while I was falling asleep. To this day, I'm not sure if the face even had a body. It had to have had hands in the least, and I say this because of what it would do to Ryan. The first time anyone besides myself had noticed, it was when Ryan had spent the night with me. As usual, it appeared in my closet as we were falling asleep. He noticed it first, and naturally he reacted as I would have expected. He sat bolt upright while grabbing a hold of me, asking what the hell was in my closet. He eventually remembered about the face when I told him, and then I told him to just turn over and ignore it, as I had been doing for the past couple months. "No, you need to tell it to leave," I remember him telling me. I stared back at him in the dark of my room, feeling surprised at him and his words. This face never did anything other than stare, rather than argue. However, I turned back to the closet. It was already gone before I could ask it to leave us alone. I pointed that fact out, actually sounding angry as I said, "He scared the face off." I left it at that and turned over, nuzzling into my pillows and feeling ready to just pass out. Ryan, however, got out of bed and slammed my closet door shut. I wish he hadn't. I really wish he hadn't. A few hours later, at a time that belonged neither to night nor dawn, I heard a voice. It was barely a whisper, but it opened my eyes nonetheless. I stayed still, just listening before I heard it again. It was louder this time, and it made my flesh erupt in goosebumps. It was my voice I was hearing, and it was saying one thing, Ryan's name. I even heard him mumble next to me in response. That was right before my closet door exploded open, and we both sat up in shock. As soon as I turned to see the closet door wide open, I lit the room with my bedside lamp. At this point, Ryan was cursing loudly, and I saw him holding his right cheek. On his cheek was a red mark that almost looked like he had been slapped. That's how everything started going downhill. Whenever Ryan came over to sleep, he insisted that my closet door should be shut, and even suggested replacing the handle with one that would lock. It wasn't every night he stayed over that something would happen, but we rarely had a peaceful night together. I'll say nothing bad ever happened to me. It was always directed towards him. In all honesty, the worse our relationship got, and the more abusive he was, the more things would happen to him, and the worse it got for him. The last time he had stayed over, before I called it quits on our relationship, he was actually choked in his sleep. I woke up to him wheezing and coughing. His eyes were wide and looked like they were popping out of his skull. His face was nearly purple with veins popping out of his forehead. His nose had even begun to bleed. I never saw anything attacking him, just the aftermath. I didn't keep in contact with him after the breakup to know for sure. However, I didn't see the face again after that night. Not for a while. Nothing happened. Not so much as a shadow or a whisper. I had figured that the face had left with him and was gone for good. This is where I wish the story had ended for me. A couple of months later, my older brother David and his wife Sarah had fallen on some financially tough times. Since it was just myself and my mom in a 5-bedroom house, she invited them and their 2 children to come live with us. The quiet house was suddenly crowded and packed full of moving boxes and furniture. Not to mention the wild 6- and 4-year-old. By this point in time, I had graduated high school. I was balancing babysitting my niece and nephew while my brother David, his wife Sarah, and my mom were away at work, along with my part-time job and new boyfriend, Jason. Everything was normal, at least as much as it could be. Honestly, I didn't start paying attention to David and Sarah's growing concerns over my 4-year-old niece Lily's nightmares until I witnessed it myself. I originally figured that it was normal for children to have nightmares. I still remember tons of twisted, demented, and frankly strange dreams from my childhood. Eventually, I noticed her lack of energy, and she seemed to have little interest in toys. Sometimes I could encourage her to nap on the couch with me, while I had Ethan, my 6-year-old nephew, watch a movie or TV. Other than that, I assumed that she had stopped sleeping at night because of the nightmares. The nightmares Lily was having only worsened when Sarah got a night job, and David was away for a few weeks at work for training and a promotion opportunity. My mom wouldn't get home until around 11 at night, so it was up to me to feed the kids dinner, bathe them, and put them to sleep. Ethan, even though he was only 6 at the time, liked boasting that he was too old for bedtime stories. I figured he said that so he could play his DS in bed for an extra 15 minutes. So it was usually just me reading to Lily in her room. On this one night in particular, she asked me to tell her a story instead of picking out a book to read. Not thinking twice about her request, I asked, "What kind of story do you want me to tell?" "Tell me about the witch," she answered me. And I immediately thought of stories like The Wizard of Oz or Hansel and Gretel. I didn't get a sentence into the story before she stopped me. "That's not scary enough," she said to me. "Tell me the scary story about the witch." With her statement, I started to realize that she wasn't only asking for a scary story, but a specific scary story about some specific witch. "I don't know what you're talking about, sweetie," I admitted, feeling this dread slowly rising and filling up my body. In the back of my mind, I knew what she was talking about, but my rationality was fervently denying it. "The witch that lives in your closet. Tell me the scary story where we die." I was floored. I sat there, staring back at my 4-year-old niece. her words running circles around my head as I tried to process how I even felt. I was scared. I was shocked. I was baffled. I was angry. It left me speechless, with my eyes wide and my mouth agape. The face had never hurt me, but I had seen what it had done to Ryan, and I wholeheartedly believed that it could kill. I wasn't sure what else to do, so I calmly told her to go to sleep and left. When my mom got home later that night, I was already waiting for her. I kept my composure and greeted her, even though I wanted to cry and tell her what Lily had told me. Instead, I held back and asked what the content of Lily's nightmares were. She initially told me that she had no idea, and that she was just going through a phase. She seemed more agitated the more I pestered her about it. So I finally flat out said, "She thinks we're going to die. She told me someone was living in my closet." She was careful with how she replied, and I know now that she was hiding something from me. She was having dreams about a person going into her bedroom at night. That's it, she said, sounding like she was already over the issue, like Lily was fine now. With her words, I decided to finally quit pressing her about the issue. Honestly, I was afraid to go to sleep that night. I knew I would see that face. I also knew what used to happen to Ryan when he would close that closet door. I was finally in bed around 2 in the morning, but I couldn't muster up the courage to close my damn closet door. While I was falling asleep, I couldn't keep my eyes off of my open closet. I know I was dozing in and out of consciousness. My eyes would droop or close and then snap open once I realized what was happening. In what seemed like an instant, the face was there, staring at me silently as always. I was fully awake in a second, and I stared back at it, too afraid to even blink. My fear slowly melted away into the anger I had felt previously, and I sat up in my bed, tightly gripping my sheets. "Go away." I spoke to my room, but hated how shattered my voice sounded. I took in another breath and more sternly said, "Go away." The face didn't move from where it was hovering at the top of my closet. "Go away." I kept repeating until I was nearly yelling. The face was suddenly gone, and it took a few more "go away" as for me to realize that. I sat in my bed now, silent, still staring at the closet door, before I finally turned on the light. I felt fear filling me up once more, so before I was too scared to do anything, I finally bolted over my bed, jumping off the bedpost, and quickly slammed my closet door shut. I was still for a while after, with my heart pounding, half expecting the door to fling back open. I then looked from my closet to my dresser, and moved so I could try and push in front of the door. In the end, it was too heavy, so I had to rip out the drawers and slide it across my carpet that way. My dresser stayed that way in front of my closet for the next few days. My peace of mind slowly began to return, and Lily hadn't had any further nightmares. I had managed to get into bed early that night, and my mom wouldn't be home for the next couple of hours from work. Of course, the peace didn't last long, and just before I was able to doze, I heard what sounded like a quiet but sharp tapping. I almost ignored it at first, but the sound was persistent and growing louder. I sat up in my bed and I just knew it was coming from my closet. I had heard that same tapping only months before. I sat in the dark of my room, eyes wide and staring at the closet door, with my heart pounding in my chest. I was almost certain that the door would bust open at any second. Despite my heavy dresser keeping it sealed shut, I sat there for what felt like an eternity, before the tapping, having grown to a piercing noise, suddenly stopped. I continued listening, eyes still wide and never leaving the closet door, while slowly reaching my hand out to turn on the lamp in my room. My room, now lit, was still silent, and my fear was slowly starting to subside, before I heard another door open in the dead quiet house. I looked away from the closet door and over to my closed bedroom door, still listening. Within seconds, I heard another door open, and the sound forced me out of bed. I opened my door to a dark hallway, and noticed that Lily's bedroom door was wide open. Taking a deep breath, I walked forward and switched on her bedroom light. I somehow knew that she wasn't in the room, before I was able to visually confirm the thought. When I saw her empty bed, I called out for her, I was only answered by Ethan's bedroom door slamming shut. Dread was filling me up, and I wanted to run back into my room and hide under the covers of my bed. But I couldn't. I had to be stronger than that. I slowly crept down the hall, calling out for Ethan now, and still received no answer from either of the children. I could see the light flooding through the cracks around his door, but when I tried the handle, it wouldn't budge. It wasn't locked. It felt like it was jammed, like someone was holding the door closed from the other side, banging on the bedroom door. I surprised myself with how loudly I shouted for each of the children by their full names. They still didn't answer me, but when I pressed my ear to the door, I could hear their voices, and a third, a young woman's voice. It was too muffled to make out what anyone was saying, but my mind went primal as I completely freaked out. It was such a blur that I can't describe how hard I was trying to get into the room. With the state of mind I was in, I finally got the idea to take the doorknob off the door altogether. The handle itself didn't have any sort of lock, and there were screws on my side that I was able to undo. After running to the backyard to find a toolbox, after forcing the doorknob apart, I was able to see partially into the room. I heard Lily speaking softly, and I was able to see Ethan standing in the corner of his room in his onesie pajamas, looking tired and confused. Finally, I was able to get his attention while trying my hardest not to scream at him. He looked hesitant at first, before scurrying over to try and help me unjam the door. I could still hear Lily talking to the third voice, and realization hit me like a train when I heard it speaking back to her. It was my own voice talking to her, encouraging her to do something. My voice was telling her that she had no other choice, and that her brother needed to die. I was still frantic, slamming into the door as hard as I could, while Ethan pulled at the hole the doorknob left from the other side. It felt like I was trying to move a solid wall, but eventually the hinges gave way, and the doorframe cracked open enough for me to get into the room. I grabbed onto Ethan as I was finally able to see Lily in the room. She was in her own onesie pajamas, and she was clutching the handle of a fillet knife my mom kept in the kitchen, with both of her hands. All of the knives were kept in a cabinet over the kitchen sink since the kids had moved in, and I still have no idea how she had got it. I was going to ask her, but the sight of the third person in the room almost immediately held all of my attention. In an image that Ryan had described to me once before, I saw that white face in Ethan's room. The blankets on his bed were wrapped tightly around the plain face, its eyes impossibly black and empty. It was positioned high near the ceiling of his room, just hovering above the bed, with nothing but air between the mattress and the ends of the blanket. I had never experienced a terror so great before in my life, and I'm surprised that I hadn't begun to manically scream. I could still hear my own voice pouring out from the face, encouraging Lily to kill her brother, and now myself. I was able to tear my eyes away from the soulless gaze of the white face, so I could look back to Lily. She was slowly coming toward myself and her brother, the knife awkward in her small hands. I was able to bring myself to action once again, and I reached out for her, spinning Lily around so she was facing away from me. I picked her up around her waist before fleeing the room. I had grabbed onto Ethan's arm so hard that I ended up bruising it as I pulled him after me. I only stopped to grab my purse before running with both of the kids out of the house. I shoved both of the children into the back seat of my car before backing out of the driveway and speeding away from the house. At this point in time, Lily was screaming. Ethan was crying and angry. I remember the 6-year-old yelling that they didn't have car seats or shoes. I was in a full panic, crying and hyperventilating, and I had no idea what to do. I would have been driving worse than any drunk person. I knew that, and I had to stop. I ended up in a parking lot to a 24-hour diner a few blocks from my house. With my car stopped, both Lily and Ethan settled down quite a bit and let me sit in silence while I tried to compose myself and figure out what to do. The clock in my car told me that my mom would be getting off of work in the next 20 minutes, but I didn't have my cell phone to call her. I shut off my car, telling the children that we could go into the diner, and I will buy them ice cream. Ethan complained again that he didn't have any shoes, nor did I or his sister, and Lily was still silent. They still followed me inside nonetheless, all three of us in pajamas. I was glad when the staff of the nearly deserted diner didn't protest us coming in and sitting at a booth before they could even speak to us. I told both Lily and Ethan I was going to order their ice cream and wander by myself up to the front counter, where a waitress and a night manager were giving me puzzled looks. I lied through my teeth to them, saying that I was babysitting the kids and someone had broken into the house. I told them that I was able to grab them and my purse before fleeing, and that I didn't bring my phone to call my mom. The manager was nice enough to let me use a phone behind the counter, while the waitress walked over to the booth, where Lily and Ethan were still sitting silently to watch them. The rest of the night staff in the kitchen quickly caught on, and I could see them whispering among themselves. While I dialed my mom's number, I managed to keep a calm, almost monotone voice while talking to my mom. I told her that I had the children at the diner and asked her to come as soon as possible. I refrained from telling her the same story about a burglar and instead told her that the children and I had gotten scared and left the house in a panic. I didn't end up going back to the house that night. Instead, my mom came and got the children, and I called Sarah home early from work that night. I ended up spending the night at my then boyfriend Jason's house. I finally told him everything I've said here, and needless to say, he was skeptical, but wholeheartedly believed that something had scared me that night. He had also convinced me to move in with him, so I wouldn't have to sleep in my room with that damned face in my closet any longer. I called my mom and told her the next morning what I was planning to do. She didn't fight much, and instead sounded worried still for Lily. When she and Sarah got back home that night, they found part of the chain link fence run over from when I had backed out of the driveway so quickly. I hadn't realized what I had done at the time, but the scrapes I found on the side of my car coincided with the description. They had also found the security door and front door both wide open. The toolbox I had grabbed from the backyard tipped over in the hallway, in front of Ethan's mangled door. They had also found the fillet knife Lily had in her brother's room. I broke down in tears when my mom told me that Ethan's blankets had been found dragged into the living room, stopping just before the threshold of the front door. I knew that the face had most likely followed us, but the thought of it actually chasing us was too much for me to handle. Over the next week, David returned from his business trip and ended up receiving his promotion, so he would be able to move his family out of the house as well. My mom had eventually been convinced to sell the house, but not before Lily had another episode. She had gotten a hold of that same fillet knife in the middle of the night and had woken up her parents by stabbing her mother in the thigh while she was sleeping. I met my family at the hospital that next morning. Sarah was fine, and oddly enough, Lily and Ethan were acting as normal, like nothing had happened. David was worried enough to call a realtor that day to try and find somewhere to live besides my mom's cursed house. That day, my mom finally opened up to me about the nightmares Lily was having. The person who would go into her room at night apparently resembled me, wrapped up in a bundle of blankets, with just my face exposed. She would call herself a witch and tell Lily that her family was going to die and that she had to save them. David and Sarah also knew about this, and they even heard my voice when I wasn't home or when I was sleeping in my room. Nobody had told me about this because I never said anything myself. My mom even went as far as telling me that she didn't want to scare me. When I was home alone watching the children at night, I never told them about the face in my closet or about what I had seen that night. I haven't mentioned it to anyone else since as well. I buried everything that had happened deep in my mind, and thankfully, nothing even slightly paranormal has happened since I had moved out. Still, over 6 years later, I cannot shake the feeling of someone watching me at night when I sleep from my closet. Beyond the last door? Yo, Nathan, hurry your ass up. Riley roared from across the parking lot, standing next to our limo and waving me and Emily down. I quickly stole a kiss with her before taking her hand and jogging toward the limo. We weren't in there for more than a moment before our other friend, Noah, shoved a flask of Jack Daniels in our face. I made sure to get one for each couple. He winked at me with a huge grin. It isn't prom night without Sir Daniels. We all burst out laughing. I took a swig from the flask before passing it over to Emily and shifted my gaze to my childhood friends. There were 8 of us total, and we had all been friends since grade school and couples since late middle school. The gang consisted of Andre, Tasha, Marcus, Sierra, Noah, and Chloe, Emily, and me. And boy, were we an interesting bunch. So whose place are we exactly going to again? I asked, as Emily leaned her head on my shoulder. The new guy, Marcus started, but Sierra finished for him, Lucas Ward. He just moved here from New Jersey. Yeah, that guy. Marcus smiled as Sierra rolled her eyes at him. Just then, the limo driver swore loudly before veering wildly to the left and right, narrowly avoiding a car driving down the opposite side of the road. We all ended up in a tangled, laughing heap in the center of the vehicle. Normally, we probably would have freaked out, but with the amount of alcohol we had consumed, we probably could have wrecked and thought it humorous. We continued to talk about the events of everything that had gone on our senior year, and before we knew it, we had reached our destination. Alrighty, kiddos, I will be here bright and early to pick you up at 8. So don't be late, you hear? We all nodded in agreement to the limo driver, but as the others turned away from him, I noticed his expression had become grim. He motioned me to come closer. It's not your time, he muttered before driving off. I just stared after the car, confused by his choice of words. What did he mean by that exactly? And what was his deal? I just shrugged it off and went to join my friends, who were all standing in front of a small, eerie-looking home. The house was light yellow, and with as much chipped paint as there was, it gave the home a weird polka-dotted look. The home almost reminded me of the Amityville horror house, with a dirt-coated attic window, a rickety old-fashioned porch, and the occasional missing shutter. Yep, this sure was where I wanted to spend the rest of my prom night. Wow, this Lucas guy seems like a real winner, Tasha stated sarcastically. Come on guys, let's just give this Lucas guy a shot. I'm sure he is a nice guy. Emily pleaded with us. She had been that way as long as I could remember, always giving people the benefit of the doubt and being optimistic about any situation. And that is why I loved her so much. Not only was she the most beautiful girl in school, she was also the least selfish and shallow person you would ever meet. I can still remember the first time we met on the school playground. I was, and still am, one of the nerdiest guys you would ever meet. Ironically, I was being picked on by Marcus when she stood up for me. Ever since then, I could never get over how strong she was. Those piercing blue eyes and her dark brown hair still, till this day, take my breath away every time I see her. Okay, we all uttered in unison, picked up our bags, and made our way into the home. Marcus rushed past everyone, throwing his bag onto the floor of the entryway. Despite the outside of the home, the inside wasn't all that bad looking. The entryway was rather large, with 5 different doorways. The one to the left led to a rather large living room with a fireplace. The second to our right led to the kitchen. 2 others were at the top of a flight of stairs on either side of the landing, and right on the wall at the center of the 2 was a large poster. The last one was dead ahead, the one Marcus had gone through. Yo, Lucas, were you a bro? I called out into the seemingly empty home. Everyone dropped their bags in the same spot as Marcus, but we got no answer. Maybe everyone got stuck in traffic on their way here, Chloe suggested, shrugging her shoulders. Hey guys, check this out. Marcus called out from the doorway in front of us. We all walked over to see a strangely large room for the size of the home, and right in the center were 2 rows of 4 beds, one for each of us. Now that is creepy, I thought to myself. Okay, this is pretty weird. I thought there was supposed to be a party here. Marcus pouted. Well, maybe there are more beds upstairs, I stated, turning to enter the entry room, and freezing after taking 2 steps out the doorway. I stared in horror and confusion at the sight before me. Guys, I think we have a problem, I stammered, pointing where the front door used to be. Everyone turned to see what I was pointing at, their jaws dropping in unison once they realized what had happened. The front door had disappeared, leaving a wall in its place. That's messed up. Marcus chuckled. It's not funny. How are we supposed to leave now? Tasha shouted at Marcus, which then caused a chain of arguments amongst everyone trying to figure out what to do. As they all bickered, I walked around, hoping to figure out what exactly was going on. That's when I noticed a small red arrow pointing up the stairway to the poster on the wall. I quickly walked up the stairs to the poster and began to read. Game rules. Note, the game starts once the first door is opened. Rule number 1. Once you open one door, another random door will appear. Rule number 2. Once you open a door, another door will disappear, and so will everything behind it. Rule number 3. You have exactly 10 minutes to open a door. If you don't, a door will automatically disappear, along with another once you open a door. Rule number 4. Every 5 minutes, I will come and find you. The first person I find, or isn't hidden well enough to my liking, I will give you 5 seconds, then chase you. Rule number 5. If I catch you, you join me /us. Rule number 6. The game ends at daybreak. Note, first door opened at 9:35 p.m. I will see one of you around 9:45. Good luck. As soon as I finished reading the game rules, I looked down on my phone to verify the time. It was 9:40. Guys, I shouted down the stairs, I think you may want to come see this. Within seconds, they were all at the top of the stairs, reading what I had just read. This is a bunch of bull crap. Marcus boomed after reading the poster. I agree, Sierra nodded. This is obviously a joke by Dane, or Lucas, or whatever his name is. Plus, this alcohol is making me sleepy, so I'm going to take a nap with my chica Sierra here. So, smell you guys later. Marcus bellowed as he made his way down the stairs with Sierra to the bedroom. I just sighed. I just feel like whatever is going on here, it shouldn't be taken lightly, I said, meeting everyone's fearful gazes. They all nodded in agreement. So, how much longer do we have left? Noah asked. 3 minutes to go, Emily uttered loudly. We should come up with a plan after we hide. Definitely a good idea. We'll meet here before we open up any doors, Andre stated. As everyone spread out to hide, I grabbed Emily and kissed her. No matter what happens, I want you to know I will always protect you, I said, staring deep into her amazing blue eyes. She looked at me and got teary-eyed. I know, you already have, she muttered, giving me a small smile and going to hide. I just stared after her for a moment, confused by the reaction she had given me. What did she mean by, I already have? I looked down at my phone and saw I only had a minute left, so I quickly ran and hid on the windowsill, which was rather large, and shut the curtains in front of me. To be honest, it felt kind of stupid to be hiding. For all we knew, Lucas could be messing with us and videotaping this whole thing to see if we would actually do what the poster said. I looked down at my phone. It was 9:46 p.m. and nothing had happened. I sighed and was just about to leave my spot when I heard a whisper, a man counting down from 5. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Then there was a sound like one of the beds being dragged across the floor and a loud thud, followed by an ear-piercing scream from Sierra. I quickly jumped out of my hiding spot and turned toward the open doorway in front of me to see Chloe, Emily, Andre, Noah, and Tasha grouped in the entryway. As I made my way to them, the guys covered the girl's eyes, and when I rounded the corner, I saw why. Starting from the bedroom and making its way up the stairs was a trail of blood. As Sierra came into the entry, everyone rushed over to comfort her, and she began to cry and yell out in pain. I, however, looked toward the top of the stairs to see a small mound at the foot of the poster. I made sure to walk at the edge of the staircase so I wouldn't get any blood on me. And when I got to the top, I gagged, then threw up at the sight before me. Marcus's neck had clearly been broken, easily at a 90-degree angle, with hundreds of cuts across his body and a large red streak up the front of his now ragged tux. My eyes then turned to the poster, where his hand seemed to be reaching toward it. On it was the number 7, written in blood. I quickly ran downstairs to see everyone arguing about what had just happened. Once I got to the bottom of the stairs, they all stopped and turned to face me. "Is he up there?" Sierra sobbed. I just nodded my head, and she immediately began to cry again. I grabbed the other 2 guys and brought them to the top of the stairs, explaining what they would find once they got there. But once we got there, to my horror, his body was gone. I swear he was just here. I shouted in disbelief. The other 2 looked just as horrified and shocked as I did. "We need to come up with a plan, and fast," Andre stated as we reached the bottom of the stairs. "And wasn't there a door there just a second ago?" he finished, pointing to where the kitchen doorway used to be. I swore under my breath and gathered everyone in the bedroom. "Okay, so," I started, a little winded. "From now on we stick together until it's time to hide. Otherwise, we can easily get picked off or lose each other. Why don't we just wait for the bastard who is doing this and just mess him up?" Tasha suggested. "Because in horror movies, that's the number 1 issue. No one tries to gang up on the killer till they're all dead. I don't think the killer is human, that's why." I admitted, a little skeptical myself. "What makes you say that?" Emily asked. "Well, judging by how quickly he was dragged up the stairs, and based on how big of a guy Marcus was, if a person were to drag him up the stairs, it would take more than 30 seconds, which is how long it took for all of us to group up in the entryway. Plus, I saw the wounds inflicted on him, and no normal person could have done that in the allotted time." "All right, but why can't we just stay here then?" Chloe questioned. "If a door disappears every 10 minutes like the rules say, then that would mean we would run out of doors eventually. And it also says that once a door is gone, everything behind it disappears. So, in theory, we would all disappear. Well, since we are all in the same room, let's open another door and see where it goes. I don't want to be here any longer than I need to be," Sierra sobbed as she got off her knees and made her way to a door at the far side of the bedroom. We all followed her as she took a deep, ragged breath and opened the door. We were right back in the entryway, except it was laid out differently than before. The left doorway was now a bedroom, with only 7 beds in it this time. The kitchen was now a large screened-in porch with a swimming pool, and the stairs now only led to 1 door, and next to it the poster. I looked down at my watch. It was 9:50. Shit, we only have a minute. Everybody, find somewhere to hide. Everyone ran their separate directions. I ran into the room that was once the bedroom and was now a study, and hid underneath a desk. As soon as I was situated, however, I heard someone running up the stairs. It didn't hit me right away till I heard a door open. I swore to myself about how stupid they were being, and how they could possibly have just gotten someone killed. But before I could dwell on the thought any longer, I heard it again. The whispering, only this time it was different. Almost like there were 2. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I don't know why I did it, but I shouted as loud as I could so everyone could hear me. Run, but it was too late. A second later, I could hear Chloe scream, followed by a loud crack and splash from the swimming pool. I sprinted out of the room to see, right in the center of the entryway, a large blood splatter mark, followed by a trail of blood to the pool. We were all in the doorway when Noah walked out of the pool, crying with Chloe in his arms. He collapsed to the ground holding her. From what I could see, her whole face was caved in, which would explain the blood spot on the floor. Everyone else threw up, but I already had my traumatizing visual. "What do we do now?" Andre asked, as he ran his hands through his hair and thought. "We have to keep moving, so whatever it is that is doing this can't catch us." "I was there," Noah stammered. "I saw them. They took her from me. Her foot was poking out from under the bed, and they grabbed her." "Them? Who is them, Noah?" I asked, putting my hand on his shoulder. "It was Marcus and another man," he finished, shaking his head in disbelief. Everyone gasped, including me. So that's what the sign had meant by me/us. I looked down at my watch. 9:59 p.m. We had to get through a door, and fast. "Guys, we have 1 minute. We need to get through a door stat," I said, taking Noah's elbow but he quickly shrugged me off. "Noah, let's go." Andre pleaded through the doorway. "I can't go on without her," he smiled sadly at us. "I love each and every one of you like family, but I must stay here with her." Once everyone left the room, I gave him a slight nudge on the shoulder. "Catch you on the flip side, brother." I smiled weakly at him. "No, you won't." And just as I exited the room and turned to face him one last time, he was gone. I placed my hand where the door used to be and prayed that whatever had just happened to him, it was fast and painless. I held in a sob, took a deep breath, and turned to face the remaining four. Andre was comforting Tasha, while Emily was kneeling down next to Sierra, who was now sitting and hugging her legs, rocking back and forth, crying. I went to the settings on my phone and set a timer to go off every 5 minutes. 1 minute before we were supposed to be hiding and before a door would disappear. "Get away from me," Sierra hissed at Emily. "How can you say something like that? Nothing is going to be okay. Marcus and Chloe are dead. Not to mention that Noah just magically disappeared with her. Screw you guys, screw this house, screw this game," and she was cut off by the sound of my phone beeping. "What is that for?" Andre asked. "I said it so we don't get caught off guard when the time to hide comes," I stated, looking to my phone. "We need to hide. Now." "No," Sierra objected. "I told you guys I'm done with this stupid game. I am not hiding." Andre reached for her arm, but she instantly shrugged him off. We all started shouting at her, telling her she was being unreasonable and that she needed to calm down. She just cursed at us and began to make her way to the study. As she did so, however, I began to hear the whispers again. "Do you guys hear that?" I asked, hoping it wasn't just me. "The whispers," Emily pointed out. "Yes, I do." "Good. It's not just me," Andre chuckled before calling out to Sierra. "Sierra, we don't have time for this. You need to hide." She stopped then in the entryway of the study, and we sighed in relief that she had finally come to her senses. But my relief was quickly replaced with horror once the counting started. "Marcus," she whispered loudly. "Is that really you? Who is that with you?" She turned around and began to scream once they counted down to 0. She started to run toward us, but as she made it halfway down the hallway, four figures shot out of the study, grabbed Sierra, and dragged her in by her ankles. We quickly sprinted down the hall and into the study, only to find that she had been impaled on a knight statue's spear with hundreds of cuts covering her body. I swore loudly and smashed my hand on the study's desk, leaving a large crack going through the center. I immediately regretted doing so. However, as my hand began to throb from the pain and began to swell, Emily put her hand on my shoulder to comfort me. "You can make it through this, Nate," Emily crooned. "You've been through too much to let this defeat you." I immediately calmed down, but I couldn't help but feel something off about Emily. She never used my nickname, Nate, mostly because she knew I didn't like it, especially when my mother used to coddle and embarrass me with it. Then again, it helped to relax me a little. "We should get moving," Andre suggested. We all nodded in agreement as we made our way to the new door in the study. We all took a deep breath before opening the next door. We were now in a large ballroom. It kind of reminded me of the one in that Stephen King movie Rose Red, except the mirrors and such were all replaced by closed doors. There were 4 long rows of tables with fancy cloths and silverware laid out. There were 6 doors in total, but one was open and led to a large hallway located at the very back of the room. "Why couldn't our prom have been here?" Andre joked. "Oh wait, there's a creepy supernatural entity killing us off. If you ask me, that would be a total buzzkill." Then, right on cue, a banner fell down at the center of the room. It read, "New rule. Doors now disappear every 2 minutes. Have fun. You have got to be kidding me." Tasha screamed in protest. I immediately added another alarm to my phone, and as I did so, the door behind us disappeared. We needed to get moving. "I say we go through the open door before it disappears," Emily offered. There seemed to be more doors to choose from. "True," I agreed, "but there are also fewer hiding spaces, which would mean we'd have to open another door in hopes of finding more, which could be risky." As soon as I finished that thought, the alarm went off. We all hugged each other, and I whispered to hide under the tables and crawl our way to the front. And if they heard the countdown start, run for the open door. Once we were all under the tables, we slowly began to make our way to the far end of the room. Once I was halfway, I stopped, as a foot came down fairly close to where I was now kneeling. I had to hold back from shouting Noah's name, as I could recognize his favorite pair of shoes anywhere. Idiot even wore them to prom. I was 3/4 of the way there when I heard a loud thud under one of the tables, followed by the counting. "Run!" I shouted, as everyone got out from under the tables and began sprinting for the door. I made it to the door first, turning around to see the other 3 right behind me. And right behind them, looking exactly as they did when they had died, were our other 4 friends and another older-looking gentleman I couldn't exactly recognize. And they were sprinting a lot faster than the living ones. I swore to myself as I thought quickly about what to do. I ran to the nearest door and got ready to open it as soon as everyone was through. Andre and Emily made it through first, but Tasha had slipped just before the doorway, and the other 5 were closing fast. Andre quickly sprinted over to her, picked her up, and threw her through the doorway. He then turned to sprint, but realized it was too late. "Open the door, Nathan!" Andre shouted. "I don't want to give them the satisfaction of catching me." I nodded and quickly opened the door I was holding, and an instant later, the ballroom was gone. "Andre!" Tasha screamed, falling into Emily's arms, sobbing uncontrollably. Emily rocked her back and forth for a minute, passing her fingers through her hair before turning to me. "What do we do now?" Emily asked, looking teary-eyed herself. "We have no choice but to move on," I sighed. As Emily and I made our way through the door I had just opened, we heard another door open up behind us. We both spun around to see Tasha opening up random doors. "What the hell are you doing?" I seethed. She turned to face me with a scowl. "I'm ending this nightmare. Maybe if it's just me left, I will win the game. Then I can get out of this hellhole." Emily ran quickly to the door behind us and opened it, but nothing happened. "Don't just stand there," she beckoned. "We need to get rid of her before she gets rid of us." I took her hand and began running through random bedrooms, kitchens, and bathrooms. I stopped after the 12th floor, turning to see that the door we had just gone through had disappeared. I sighed in relief and wrapped my arms around Emily, kissing her on the forehead. We had barely just caught our breath when my alarm started to go off once again. I clenched my jaw, knowing that no matter what happened, this would probably be the last time I would see Emily. "Emily, I just want to let you know," she cut me off before I could say anything more with a kiss, and I kissed her back. "We should probably start running," she stated, eyeing the only room in front of us. "You make sure you stay as close to me as you possibly can, okay? That way none of US can get left behind." She nodded and kissed me on the cheek. "Let's go," she said, just as the whispers began to count down once more. I took her hand, and we took off to the nearest doorway. Door after door, room after room we went, but they kept coming, never stopping once, never letting up their pursuit. I could hear Emily starting to get winded, and we slowed down to a jog. "We can't keep this up," she uttered between breaths. As soon as she said that, I opened the next door, and it was a dead end. We looked to be in the attic now, with the large rounded glass window. I turned to see the others, only seconds behind us. I turned to the glass to see that it was full of cracks and seemed like it was ready to break. I turned to Emily. "Do you trust me?" I called to her. "Yes," she shouted as she followed my gaze. I grabbed her, wrapping my arms around her head and waist, leaping backward so that I could break her fall. If I had remembered correctly, it was almost 3 stories. I could survive that, I told myself. As soon as we broke through the window, everything seemed to move in slow motion. I could see the glass around me light up like fireflies as the sunlight shone through them. I could feel Emily's tight grip around me, and behind her were 7 hands reaching out toward us. Just as we were about to hit the sunlight, I could feel her grip loosen around my waist. I screamed out as loud as I could, reaching for her reaching for me, as I fell, and she was dragged up through the window. A jolt went through my body, and I could hear a loud crack as my head banged against the sidewalk. Immediately, my vision began to blur. I could feel the warm stickiness of blood forming around my head. I looked up one last time to the attic window to see all 8 of them staring down at me. I turned toward the sun and closed my eyes, and everything went white. Literally, something was so bright that all I could see was white. But as quickly as it came, it was gone, and all I could see was a blur of figures moving around me and muffled noises of what seemed like people talking. "Nathan," called a familiar voice. "Nathan, if you can hear me, say something." "I can hear you just fine," I muttered. A few people began to cry, and as my vision cleared, I could see people hugging each other, crying tears of joy. Where exactly was I? "Nathan, I can see you're confused," stated the voice I now recognized as Marcus's father, which was weird because he worked in a hospital. I was pretty sure there were no hospitals in heaven. "Nathan, you've been in a coma for a month now. How are you feeling?" "Wait, what?" I spat in disbelief. "Ow, was it from my fall?" I asked. Everyone there just stared at me, mostly with grief or sorrowful expressions. "Nathan, there was no fall," Marcus's father explained. "A month ago, you were in a car accident. You were on your way to a friend's house after prom. On your way, a drunk driver was driving on the wrong side of the road and struck your limo head-on." He paused a moment to let it sink in. As he did so, he pulled out photos of the wreckage. What I saw completely shocked and horrified me. I stared at the pictures in complete silence. I could see it was equally as tough for Marcus's father as well. The first photo was of Marcus, who had been flung from the vehicle, snapping his neck on impact. His body was covered in cuts caused by flying through the windshield and sliding across the road. The next photo was of Chloe, who was also flung from the car, but her head was crushed as the limo rolled over her. The last photo was of Sierra, who had been impaled by what looked like the exhaust pipe of the vehicle, and she was also covered in cuts made by glass. I stared at the last photo in disbelief. The photos matched the wounds that had killed my friends in the house almost perfectly, but that didn't explain what had happened to the rest of them. What happened to everyone else? I asked reluctantly. Well, after the car struck the limo, it caused it to flip on its side and roll, tossing the first 3 and yourself from the vehicle, Marcus's father began. The vehicle then rolled off the side of the bridge you were all driving across. We were able to locate 2 bodies inside the limo, which had fallen into a river. The other 2 remain missing in the river. So, who were the ones found in the vehicle? I asked, already beginning to connect the dots. Felix, and he hesitated a moment as he saw me begin to tear up. Emily. I stifled a sob and nodded that I was ready for the rest. He handed me a tablet with a video on the screen, ready to play. This was recovered from the limo. It's footage of what happened in the limo at the time of the accident. Everyone's eyes were on me as I played the video. As I watched, there was one part that hit me the hardest. As the limo was struck, I lunged straight for Emily, wrapping my arms around her just as I had done before jumping out the window. I watched as we bounced around the vehicle a few times before I went out one of the windows. Emily's dress got caught on the glass, dragging her back in. Then, a few moments later, the car jolted and the tape went black. I asked everyone to leave, to give me a moment to take it all in. As everyone left, I cried. It all finally made sense. They say you hear things when you're in a coma. All the weird things everyone had said to me made sense now. It's not your time. Emily calling me Nate. That was my mom talking to me. They also say that when you're in a coma, you can get stuck in the in-between, which would also explain some of the comments they made to me about making it through the night and me already doing my best to protect Emily. It finally all made sense. I took a deep breath to calm myself down. Once the tears had stopped, I opened my mouth to call out for everyone to come back into the room, but was cut off. I turned in horror as my phone alarm went off, signaling that it had been 10 minutes. I was in my own room, so that meant there was only one door in the entire room. I had to check. I reached out, grabbing the curtains around my bed, took a deep breath, and flung them open. Game over. The battery clock. One of my first memories as a child was a funeral. My uncle's funeral. He was my mom's half-brother and considerably younger than her, as he was from her dad's second marriage. I think he was in his mid-20s, and he was addicted to ecstasy. Of course, I didn't know that at the time. Since he was addicted to the high, he started to get depressed whenever he wasn't high and ended up committing suicide. He hung himself in his bedroom. How you explain that to a 4-year-old? I don't know if my mom told me about the hanging back then, but I knew that he had killed himself. I remember my mom telling me that he thought no one loved him, and that's why he did it. She doesn't remember telling me this, but I remember blaming myself for his death. I was always afraid of older men when I was young. I'm not sure why. I think I was just a really shy kid. I never wanted to play with my uncle, and I always avoided him. At 4 years old, I thought that he killed himself because of me. I know now that that's not true, but I still feel guilty about never wanting to spend time with him. The most vivid memory I have of the funeral is playing a game with my sister and my 2 cousins. It was called Inky Pinky Ponky. Maybe you've heard of it, maybe you haven't, but I've never heard anyone mention it since that day. I've heard of similar versions of the game, but not the same as this one. In this game, one person is the leader and everyone else stand in a circle with their fists held out in the middle. The leader thumps everyone's fists around the circle, saying this rhyme. Inky Pinky Ponky, Daddy bought a donkey. Donkey died, Daddy cried. Inky Pinky Ponky. Whoever's fist the leader lands on at the last word has to put that hand behind their back, and then it repeats until only one person is left with a hand in. They're the winner. At 4 years old, I really hated that game. My uncle's death was the first death I had ever had to cope with, and singing about a dead donkey did not help me much. I always thought being afraid of death was a normal fear that everyone had, but my fear went deeper. I refused to watch any movies where characters died. I didn't watch The Lion King until I was about 16 years old. I was terrified of hospitals, and I still won't go in one unless I absolutely have to. I was always afraid to go to sleep when I was young, and I think it had something to do with the fact that going to sleep and dying seemed so similar. Parents often explain death as going to sleep forever. I'm not sure if that's how my parents explained it to me, but it certainly would explain it. Perhaps my fear of sleep also stemmed from the nightmares I used to have. One in particular is so silly now that I look back on it. I dreamt that I was running away from a witch in this forest. She eventually caught me, brought me back to her house, and tried to cook and eat me. Of course, I woke up before that happened. Another time, when I was older, I dreamt that I had done something bad at school, and they were going to punish me with the death penalty. I begged my parents to do something about it, but they just shrugged it off. I woke up as I was sitting in the electric chair. One dream that I remember the least about probably affected me the most. I dreamt of a funeral, but not just any funeral, a funeral for a baby. The only image I still remember from this dream is a tiny little coffin. That image haunted me throughout my childhood. A few years ago, I was going through old photos on a rainy afternoon. I sat on the floor of the living room, flipping through the albums, admiring how cute I was. Then I went through a box of photos, which was mostly doubles or just pictures that had never made it into the album. Towards the end of the box, I found a card with a picture of a baby on it. The baby kind of looked like me, but I knew it wasn't because it said Peter on it. I didn't bother to open the card. I just turned it to my mom and asked her who it was. Oh, that's the funeral card from when your Aunt Laura's baby died. Aunt Laura had a baby? I asked. Sort of. The baby was stillborn at about 7 months. It was the closest to full term she had ever reached, so they had a funeral for the baby. You were there. My mom's casual retelling of the event flooded my mind with images. It all came back to me before I could even blink. My dream of the baby's funeral wasn't just a dream. It had actually happened. I was just too young to remember. The baby died when I was about 3, almost 4, about 6 months before my uncle's funeral. My brain was unable to retain that memory, but the nightmare that haunted me for years after stuck with me. One day, when I was about 14 years old, my mom got a phone call. She sat at the table, crying on the phone, and I knew something was terribly wrong. I stood a few feet from her, tears running down my face too, even though I didn't know what happened. I've always been a sympathetic crier, especially when it comes to my mom. She held the phone in her lap when the conversation was over and told me that my Aunt May had died. She was my mom's sister, and they hadn't spoken in years due to drama between them and my grandmother. But still, she was her sister. I held my mom's head in my arms as we both cried for several more minutes. Then, she had to go downstairs. My grandmother lived in our basement, and my mom had to tell her. No way was I going to be a part of that. I can only imagine the pain someone feels when they find out their child has died. It wasn't entirely a shock. We knew she had a brain tumor, but that didn't make it much less sad. I went to sit on the couch while my mom broke the news. Behind our couch, on a ledge, we had this clock. It was a German carousel clock, and I liked to watch as the little gold balls of the carousel spun around and around. I think in a way it soothed me. Watching time tick by as the carousel spun was relaxing, much like the waves of the ocean flowing in and out. I turned around to watch the clock, but the carousel had stopped spinning. The time on the clock was 3:47. I checked the clock on the VCR, which said it was 4:22. I sat on the couch with my hands in my lap, thinking about my aunt. I thought about how my mom must have felt. I wondered if she felt guilty for not speaking to her for all that time, just like I had felt guilty for never spending time with my uncle before he died. My mom came back upstairs a few minutes later. She started walking towards the other couch to sit down when her eyes fixed on the clock. "That's it," she said. She grabbed the clock, lifted up the glass dome, and took the batteries out. She marched to the garage and tossed in the bin where we put dead batteries. She returned to the living room, looking exasperated. Of course, she would be upset. Her sister had just died, but why all the commotion over a clock? "Mom, what's wrong?" I asked. "That godforsaken clock," she muttered, rubbing her forehead with one hand. "It's just a clock, Mom. What's the big deal?" She sat next to me on the couch, and it seemed like she was trying to compose herself before she spoke again. "I've never told you this before, but I was married once before I married your dad. His name was David. He was a few years older than me, and I was so in love. He asked me to marry him when I was only 19, and I was head over heels for the guy. So I said yes. We were married about a year after that. We got that clock as a wedding present from one of his relatives. I had always thought that the clock was a wedding present because we called it an anniversary clock. I don't know if that was a real name for it, but that's what we called it. I assumed it was for my parents' wedding, and I had never bothered to ask about it. It was just a clock after all." She continued. "Anyway, one day he got into a car accident. While he was in the hospital, they had to do some brain scans to make sure there was no bleeding. That was when they found a brain tumor. David had always suffered from headaches, but it had just become a part of his life, and he never bothered to do anything about it. Turns out the tumor had probably been there since he was born, and his brain had just formed around it, still allowing him to function normally."
And that was tonight's tale from the Shadowed Tales archive. If it left a mark on your mind, if the silence feels heavier now, then the story did what it was meant to do. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the darkness. New stories are always on their way. Until then, keep the lights low and the doors locked.